Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. Holy cow, Brian, it's been over a month. I'll talk a little bit about why as soon as we get going. But anyway, I'm your host, Ray Alvarez, found most places as a Nerd Numbers, back to talk about why my favorite player, Nikola Jokic, is not the MVP. With me, as always, is my producer, voice of God, man of many hats, Brian Foster. Say hey, Brian.
Hey, Dre, it's great to be back after a month. And yeah, I hope everyone had a good holidays and whatnot and is staying out of the weather. I was just talking about how we got a bomb cyclone heading our way here on January 3rd in Northern California. But, you know, what can you do if there's a storm but watch some NBA basketball?
Well, that was actually what. So the current schedule has been about every 2 weeks. We podcast, and then on the off weeks I play video games on the same. Actually, I'll add to the. I haven't been doing this on channel. We've been putting on Rickster GT, but that would be fun to do. Christmas time, my wife had like the prognostication of a weather person because she read an article where it was saying really cold weathers on Thursday, the Thursday before Christmas, were really going to hamper travel. And for anybody that's ever dealt with an airline, they are fucking liars.
Oh, yeah.
So airlines will like send out when you get an email from an airline that's like, hey, by the way, everything's fine. You should be like, why did you email me that? For good reason. So basically my wife correctly called that the airline was going to shut down flights. And on Thursday, there was just this Arctic blast that hit the United States. And it was strong enough that it basically went super far south as well. Basically, Patrick, I know in Seattle, was impacted, wasn't able to travel. It kind of missed our area of Wisconsin, but it doesn't matter if it shuts down all the airlines and all the connecting flights, everything's down. So we drove, barely beat a blizzard to get to Colorado. And unfortunately, the downside of that is we had, it's a lot longer to drive, the why drive when you can fly comment, 100% right, Michael Jordan. We drove instead of flying, and that took a lot longer. And the cost, Brian, was we couldn't do the Box Score Geek show before the holidays. So luckily, we are back on an off week, but we have a ton to talk about.
Oh, that's right. Let's do it.
All right. So fun other news. At Substack, I actually produced an article right before, and I had a couple other ideas planned that didn't happen because of that snowstorm. But the NBA finally did what it should have done over a decade ago. I didn't realize this. In 2009, the NBA renamed the NBA Finals MVP to the Bill Russell Award. And my 2 cents on that one is I don't really have any complaints. Bill Russell's the only player, I think, with 11 rings. I've kind of said my piece on Bill Russell, where at times it seems like I'm harsh on players like him and Bill Walton, and it's really more the fans. I'm really more upset that in the modern NBA, there is absolutely no way Bill Russell is a franchise player, 5-time MVP. He is a journeyman like Ben Wallace, like I would say at his peak. I almost said Brooke Lopez. I meant to say Robin Lopez, who was really good. He's like Joakim Noah. Players like that, defensive players that do not get the respect they are still due in the modern NBA. But he was a fantastic player, absolutely deserved the name of that award. The NBA then sat on its hands for 13 years before naming the remaining awards. And I figured we'd run down what I said. And I actually did some Twitter polls, Brian, and I'll let you know the outcomes of those and what the fans thought. So that's fun. I figure we can just get going on that unless you have anything else to preempt with.
No, just shout out to Bill Russell, who just died a few months ago.
Yeah, that was
absolute
really
legend off the court, even more so than on. And I think that's why people really go to the map for him. And, here in the Oakland area, he famously went to McClymonds High School, didn't make the team initially, and had to play on the, non-varsity team. And so he had to, fight to get to where he is. And yeah, everyone loves Bill Russell. He was just because he was around the NBA for so long after he retired, and his presence was always there.
And I know he definitely had that heel persona. He'd tell modern players he'd kick their ass and stuff. And what I would say is, for some reason, unlike, say, Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal, who just kind of grate on me with that attitude, he managed to do it in the right way. And he also seemed to have respect. He would note, I seem to recall Bill Russell was noting good passing players like Noah at one point. So Just a fantastic player. Absolutely no problems with that award. I didn't even bother trying to come up with another one, but every other award, Brian, I did. I'll be curious about your opinions and I'll tell you what the internet thought.
Oh yeah.
So, first one, MVP, the Michael Jordan trophy. And my 2 cents is this is pepperoni pizza, as in, for at least non-vegetarians, I apologize. I didn't even bother going down that rabbit hole in the article, but for most people, if you order and that's like, that would actually help my point, which is say, even if you're like, what about vegetarians? I'm like, exactly. They're people that will be not the standard, but for a lot of like parties, if you order a pepperoni pizza, most people will be okay with it. Michael Jordan is the pepperoni pizza choice for this. You're not going to have many complaints. That being said, I said there was a much better alternative, which is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And what's also funny is if you look at the MVP trophy, Michael Jordan, I guess, said he didn't want it to look like him. And it almost looks like the player's doing a sky hook. So my opinion is you just put some goggles on the MVP trophy,
Amazing.
call it the Kareem Trophy, because Kareem, for those that don't know, has the most MVPs of any player in NBA history with 6. Now, admittedly, very similar to Bill Russell, this would never happen again. Players like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Moses Malone were able to get MVPs on bad teams when it was voted on by the players. That doesn't happen in the modern NBA, but fine. He has the largest gap in finals MVPs of any players. That includes players like LeBron. He is still the all-time leading points leader, not for long, but he is there. My 2 cents is this should be the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar trophy. I'm curious what you think, and then I'll tell you what the audience thought.
I am a vegetarian, so I don't like pepperoni pizza. So I would go with Kareem here. But your point is correct. I think both of these guys would have been fine. Interesting point from Zach Lowe on his podcast was that he thought a potential reason this could have happened is that Kareem already does have an award named after him, the off the court award. I'm trying to remember what it is, for humanitarian excellence or whatever. So interesting point, but yeah, I mean, he could have been the MVP award as well.
I saw somebody point out that they thought Bill Russell could be the Defensive Player of the Year award.
Mm.
And strictly speaking, I don't have a problem with that. But then I just said, hey, the finals MVP is already named after him. And that's, that's acceptable, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to go further. I don't think I had what was it? The Larry Bird and the Magic Johnson awards for Eastern and Western. No, I forgot to put those in the article, but no, the playoff award ones, the Bill Russell, the Larry Bird, the Magic Johnson trophies, no issues with any of those. And it's really hard to find a better name, especially because modern NBA with new contracts, et cetera, you're just not going to find a player on one team that has that level of sustained dominance. For those that don't know, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson were in every single finals from 1980 to 1989. One of the two of those was in an NBA final that entire decade, often both. So, no complaints with those. Forgot to put them in, but figured I'd throw them out because they're there. But yeah, if you've got a trophy named after you, like, Magic Johnson is an MVP candidate, which I wouldn't have put for the MVP trophy, but as an example, he could have been there. I'm like, well, he already has a trophy named after him. Same point here. The off the court one, I don't count. It's not the same. And we'll actually get to that level of logic with the trophy coming up. But glad we all agree. And by the way, straw poll, survey says if we were doing prices right, my followers agreed as well, said that the MVP trophy should be named the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar trophy. So love it.
Oh, I want to get in on Magic and Bird real fast. Just that for people our age, young Gen X, older millennials, just Magic versus Bird. Jordan would come along a little bit later, right? But the three of them, that was the NBA. That was the beginning of the television era, right? To really come on strong with David Stern promoting the league. There was a Magic versus Bird series of video games. You probably remember that. You'd play one-on-one as Magic or Bird against the other one. There is a Magic versus Bird McDonald's commercial where they're doing these ridiculous trick shots. Like
I thought that was MJ versus Bird.
Oh, was it? I'm sorry.
But the big huge one that was a real big deal was the Converse commercial. Yeah. Where they got Magic and Larry Bird to do a Converse commercial together. And I think Larry Bird was like, the only way I'll do it is if you film it at my house in the off season.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And I was going to say, and like the commercial starts with like Magic Johnson rolling up in a limousine to Larry Bird's house, which is just amazing.
And Magic versus Bird even played in college in the NCAA finals.
One of the biggest games ever, right? Didn't it end with like Larry Bird crying on the sidelines after just an amazing match?
Yeah. I mean, those two absolutely deserved.
I'll take a brief tangent here on that because I think there are two sets of rivalries. I think you can do Bird versus Magic, and I think you can do Wilt versus Russell. And
Yeah.
I don't think any now it's not to say there haven't been great rivalries, there haven't been great, back and forth in NBA history. For instance, Michael Jordan versus the bad boy Pistons. Of course, then he teams up with the bad boy Pistons. You could think of that as like Super Macho Man and or just Randy Macho Man, not Super Macho Man, that's Punch Out. Randy Macho Man Savage teaming up with Hulk Hogan, the superpowers, right? That kind of thing. I just don't think when you gauge length and intensity and greatness, I think it's basically Bird and Magic, Wilton Russell, and kind of nothing else in NBA history comes close. I could be wrong.
Off the top of my head, I don't think anyone else really played each other as many times as those two rivalries did, right? Like you said, the extended period of time was really the thing.
Yeah, I mean, you can actually give like Steph Curry, LeBron James, they have what the four finals against each other. That's definitely amazing.
That one's a
There,
candidate.
there are some good ones, but just yeah, that's the problem. Is it's really in the modern NBA, it's almost impossible to match that intensity. So there you go. All right, follow up. This next award is one where, I'll say this with the exclusion of one of these award trophy names, I don't have a problem. The NBA did a really good job picking these names with the exclusion of one. I just came up with some better ones. And so for this one, the defensive player of the year, I went with Ben Wallace over Hakeem Olajuwon. It's worth noting Hakeem Olajuwon won the award two times, is the all-time leader in blocks on a now defunct blogish site I had. I pointed out that the real blocks leader in NBA history, outside of probably being Bill Russell or Wilt Chamberlain, who we just can't track. We don't have those stats. So I might not share. Need to readjust, Brian.
Oh, go for it.
Outside of being able to, they didn't keep track of the stats in Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell's era, so we just have no idea. But I bet both of them did great. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, we can really easily extrapolate that he would be the all-time blocks leader because there were 3 seasons of his career he played without blocks being recorded, and after those 3 seasons, he basically averaged like 4 blocks a game for the next 5 seasons. So it's ridiculous to assume he wouldn't have been able to easily surpass Hakeem, but can't take that away from, at least in the books. Hakeem Olajuwon has an untouchable blocks record. No other player is going to touch it now. 2-time defensive player of the year. Absolutely no hate with this award, but I just bring up that, there are two players with the defensive player of the year. We're two players with the Defensive Player of the Year award 4 times. That's Ben Wallace and Dikembe Mutombo. It was really, really hard between the two, but here's the main thing, Brian. Sometimes I do turn into a conventional fan, even though I'm a big Dikembe fan. Ben Wallace has a ring. Ben Wallace shot down Shaq and Kobe. I think Ben Wallace is universally snubbed. I think it would have been good to name this trophy after him, but is what it is.
Yeah, see, these are some good arguments. I would be very tempted by Mutombo and Rodman as well. You mentioned him later in the piece. The rebounds of Rodman are incredible.
He led the NBA in rebounds 7 years in a row, which is ridiculous.
Incredible stuff. Ben Wallace, I do favor, though, just for the reason you mentioned. Unheralded, took down Shaq and Kobe. Everyone says that team had no stars. They had stars. They had Ben Wallace. They had Chauncey Billups locking down on defense.
I always bring up that Ben Wallace led all centers in the East, in part because Shaq had moved to the West, but Ben Wallace led all centers in the East in votes, and he was an all-star starter. So, I mean, this comes back to my like Bill Russell point. It's going in the 60s and 70s, Ben Wallace would be a star. In the modern NBA, he just never was. It still drives me nuts that people are like, he didn't belong first ballot in the Hall of Fame. He absolutely did. Would love to have seen him get this, just, the award named after him as a result, but is what it is. And I can't be mad at Hakeem. He's pretty amazing. This one, though, Brian, funny thing, my voters tied 5-5. This was one of the least cared about award votes. And then they tied in the end. So they said, maybe we should name it the Ben Wallace and Hakeem Olajuwon trophy.
Nice. I love it.
All right,
just put them both on it.
Good.
Put
yeah, that would work.
Put like 3 or 4 of those good centers on the trophy. I'd be down for it.
Oh, perfect. All right, 6th man of the year, the John Havlicek. I hope I'm getting the pronunciation correct.
You got it. Yeah, you got it.
But no complaints with this. This is a guy that played off the bench during the Celtics dynasty, won a Finals MVP. One reason I also appreciate that is back in that era, the NBA did not record games started, so it's nice to remind people, hey, there was this guy off the bench that played really well for these teams that you really love. And my only I don't have a good argument, Brian. If you read the article, it's like two sentences. I make a reference to Havlicek stealing the ball, which is a major playoff play in his history.
Mm.
I've argued for years this should be the Manu Ginobili Award, and I still like that. And so I don't have a good reason. This is just me like going like I like Coke over Pepsi. I would have named this a Manu Ginobili Award, but and my voters agreed. But I think that's recency bias. I think that's because a lot of fans, you as you're pointing out, like Gen X, millennial, etc. It is really weird when you realize a lot of the fans that follow you or talk to us about basketball, they're like in their 20s and 30s, like, oh my God, you're so young. I don't think a lot of them know about the old Celtics, but yeah, I like Ginobili. I don't have an argument, and the fans agreed though.
Yeah, I'm biased against the old era players too. Um, and also just Ginobili is someone I don't want to say he's underrated, but
He's underrated. I agree with that.
well, I think the obvious thing is we both think he had a much better career than Kobe, and most people won't agree with that. Like I would take Wade or Ginobili over Kobe's body of work just for the whole career. Although Kobe's height was pretty good at his top, but
And what's really remarkable about Wade and Ginobili, I love that point, is that both of them actually had like better playoffs and finals than Kobe.
yeah,
Kobe did string together some. I would argue he did string together like a Finals MVP worthy season once. He didn't get an award for it, but there was one playoffs. He was the MVP for the Lakers with Shaq. Actually, I have stressed that I'm not a fan of his MVP award, but I don't have a problem with it, which is a fun contrast. Whereas Ginobili and Wade had amazing finals. Where I think Ginobili, I think in '03 was robbed of the final. Well, it sounds mean to call it that way, but Ginobili should have won the 2003 Finals MVP over Tim Duncan, and then in 2007, actually Ginobili, Tony Parker, and Tim Duncan all basically played about the same. So you could have given the award to any of them, and it would have been fine. So I can make the argument that Ginobili's put up two Finals MVP performances. Of course, Dwayne Wade put up both a Finals MVP performance that he got and he deserved, and one where because his team lost, he didn't get it. So yeah, I would. It's interesting where like Wade and Ginobili are two great ones. Where with a player like let's say Tracy McGrady, you might say Tracy McGrady had a better career than Kobe. I don't know if I agree with that, but I'm just throwing it out there as an example.
that's
And you
pretty
could point,
close. I think that's pretty close. They both had
but you
good
could,
careers, but injuries, right?
but I'm saying you could point to the playoffs. Then people could say, well, yeah, but Kobe more playoffs and stuff, and part of that's luck of the draw with the team. But Wade and Ginobili, I agree with better than Kobe. We said it.
Yeah. I know it's unpopular, and rest in peace, Kobe. That's the tough part about this argument these days. I wish he was around to make the case for himself.
Oh, actually, that's a funny one. And also, I know he got the All Star MVP, and again, same point, no complaints. I forgot. I think when that happened, I just said, yeah, no complaints with that because yeah, he has four. I think he's tied with the most, if not the most, All Star MVPs. And the All Star game is a much different game than the regular. And I think looking over his body of work, he earned them. So it's like, yeah, the awards that were named before this, I don't really have a better argument for other players than the ones that have it. Had a couple here though.
Yep. Yep.
All right. By the way, what did you just say? You stick with me on recency bias. Go Ginobili.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, Ginobili is one of the best players of all time, so he's certainly one of the best six man, I think.
The next one here actually shocked me. In that I didn't. But when I actually the first version of this article was just a tweet thread, and then I was like, hey, this is actually a good piece, and I wrote it. The first time I wrote this, I said the rookie of the year named after Wilt Chamberlain, the Wilt Chamberlain trophy. I was like, yeah, no notes. That's perfect. Wilt Chamberlain won rookie of the year as won rookie of the year and MVP his first year in the league, 37 points, 28 rebounds a game. Only one other player in NBA history has done that, the other being Wes Unseld. And Wes Unseld did it getting like 18 rebounds, but like 12 points a game. And so again, I could say Wilt Chamberlain would win the MVP. If Wilt Chamberlain came in as a rookie, he would win it again, right? Like he could conceivably still do it in the modern NBA. Wes Unseld, no hope. The argument against that though is Wilt came from an era where players were expected to play all 4 years in college. So he was 23 entering the NBA. And I was shocked to find this player, but it made sense. So Spencer Haywood in the ABA, and I really do consider the ABA and NBA really close to each other. You have to respect them. Some of the greatest players, Dr. J, Artis Gilmore came from the Moses Malone came from the WNBA, played great in the
The
WNBA.
ABA, not the WNBA.
Or okay, did I say WNBA? There's some great
okay.
WNBA players that we got to give respect to as well.
Yeah.
But different argument. I'll be talking with Dave Barry about that on Thursday. But anyway, so the ABA, right, was the precursor to the modern NBA. A lot of players we need to give respect to from that era. And Spencer Haywood is another player that won MVP and Rookie of the Year the same year for the Denver Rockets, now the Denver Nuggets. He did that as a 20-year-old, so more closer to contemporary players. And he actually won a court case arguing that younger people shouldn't have to play all 4 years in school and can come straight to the NBA. So he had a lawsuit that led the way to modern rookies. He did what modern rookies think like Luka Doncic did as a 20-year-old. Absolutely amazing. I can see the NBA in general does not like rewarding players like Oscar Robertson, Spencer Haywood, people that fought for labor rights and won. But he was the one I picked, and unfortunately, my Twitter poll, I'll blow it immediately, Brian. I think it got one vote, and all I hope that means is that Spencer Haywood or someone, I hope he's still alive. I hope Spencer Haywood or someone associated with him follows me.
Hell yeah. And one thing on Wilt, which is interesting, so the fact that he came into the league at 23 years old, he had already been playing professionally before that. He had famously played professionally in high school when he was like 15 or 16 years old under an assumed name to try to skirt labor laws, but he was so good already that he could do it. So Will had maybe already been playing, professional games for 5 years or so when he went to the NBA.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So, what do you are you going to be? Are you going to side? You're going to be on a lonely island with me? Say Spencer Haywood would be a great award name.
I I'm going with Wilt. I think Wilt. No, I mean, Wilt always gets short shrift in the Bill Russell debate. They always say he got dominated by Bill Russell, even though I think Bill Russell just had better teammates.
It was team based, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the time that he had Jerry West and some other good players, they won it in 1972 or 4 or whatever. But
and don't forget that same coach, if I recall, benched Bill Russell during a finals because Bill Russell said he was like feeling hurt or injured. And then Bill Russell said, "Put me back in, coach." The coach said no, and they lost in 7 to Bill Russell. So, yeah.
No, Wilt needs an award.
All right. Okay, that's fair. All right. This is the only one I was like, what the hell? And even after reading up on why, just had to say no. Most improved player, George Mikan. George Mikan put up his second best numbers in his career as a rookie, including just a great performance. There is no argument behind George Mikan being the most improved. The argument people give is that George Mikan has made drills that improve players. This was kind of hearkening back to the Dikembe Mutombo, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar award. Like, oh, well, he does other stuff, so it's related. But no, the entire thesis of all of these other awards is a player that was that award, right? Hakeem Olajuwon would have or should have won the Defensive Player of the Year award. Michael Jordan obviously did win MVP. So this should be named after most improved player. I was shocked the one I picked never won most improved, but could clearly deserve it. But yeah, I had nothing for this. And then what I came up with, I said Steve Nash. Steve Nash was a bad rookie, turned into a decent player, went to Dallas, turned into a star, left Dallas, turned into an MVP player, multiple major jumps in his career. The Steve Nash trophy makes more. And I didn't do like a lot of data sweeping, right, to actually look for like the biggest jumps and stuff. But just off the top of my head, this made much more sense. Steve Nash over George Mikan.
Yeah, this is a really good one. Steve Nash was not a dominant player until he got a little bit older. And even though he was really good in in college, right? He famously beat Arizona, the number 2 seed, with the number 15 seed Santa Clara Broncos. So he was already kind of a big star in college, in American college, even though he's Canadian. He did play in America. So Steve Nash is a great choice, right? Like you said, going from Phoenix to Dallas and then back to Phoenix, like that whole thing, yeah, it's a great choice. I thought of a few others. We talked
Oh
about
yeah, I'd like to hear it, actually, just for fun. This would be cool.
yeah, no, we talked about Chauncey Billups earlier, and he's one of those guys. He got drafted really early and didn't do a whole lot, and then later on, when he was a veteran, he was really good. You know, with the Pistons and Ben Wallace, like we were talking about. Another great one is Zach Randolph. He was not. He came to the league very young.
Zach Randolph's a nice one. I like that one.
He was in Portland, and I think he was playing behind Rasheed Wallace or something like that. He couldn't get as much minutes, but eventually he ended up on Memphis Grizzlies and some other teams. I'm trying to think. He played for Boston as well. He had a great long career in the end and was a very good player.
Yeah, I mean him. I think the problem was like he had gotten like a max contract. He's one of those players that we think was overrated, but like the mainstream called him like a star. So that's the only rough part I would give to Zach Randolph. But
He
those
was
I
up
like
and
those.
down. He had some injuries as well.
All right, very last one. This was just kind of silly, Brian. In part because I don't like this award, but I don't hate the player. So, clutch player of the year, the Jerry West Trophy, and I basically said I don't like clutch as something to reward. Even the players like Kobe, like Michael Jordan, if you look at their full body of work, clutch was such a small part of it. That's not the thing to look for. And that often just turns into, eye tests or things that you remember and you just have to realize that, luck of the draw can hit things. In fact, Jerry West had a point where he had a ball very much like Kawhi Leonard's triple bounce that went in and advanced Kawhi and got him the finals MVP eventually. Jerry West had one of those in the NBA Finals, and it bounced out, rimmed in and out. I did link to a 70-footer he made in the playoffs to take it to overtime once. So I'm like, yeah, no real complaints with Jerry West. But then my stupid glib one is Tim Duncan, and my argument being, what's clutch? If you don't need clutch, so if you have a player that just wins in regulation, that you can rest, that gets you in playoff shape so you don't have to worry. That's the true measure of clutch. And to the modern bias, my voters shockingly went for this, but I'll kind of even admit that was kind of me just getting to the end of the article and not wanting to throw out two awards, especially since I agreed with it. One, I agreed with Jerry West. So, that was my counter argument. It did get some love.
Yeah, I know I'm with you. I'm just whenever I see clutch, I just roll my eyes and I can't really take it seriously. I don't know. Are they trying to give Jerry West something after he was so appalled at his portrayal in the Lakers TV show? I don't know.
I still need to both watch that and discuss that with Chris Ye, and hopefully you will see, Brian, if that happens in 2023. That
The
would be
Jerry West
awesome.
actor does an excellent job. I think you would like the portrayal.
In general, I think I would enjoy. How about for next, Brian? Anything else stand up on the awards? I was just happy to get a piece out, happy to get some engagement with the listeners. Happy you agree for the most part, except Spencer Haywood. I love that pick. I just
No, I
wish
think
it
I would
got a
have
little more.
to. I'd have to look at the numbers some more. Yeah, man, that was a while ago that he played. No, I think you're right. The league did a good job, and thinking of alternate names is very fun as well. So yeah, I
With the
mean it's.
exclusion of George Mikan, and that could maybe be them like shoving it to the Lakers, being like, you really should have respected him earlier. I don't know.
Oh, that's an interesting take. Yeah, I think that's what it is in the end. Is this did feel kind of political to me, and I don't know. That's fine.
All right. Well, this is something that's really fascinating to me. I'll throw this out. For Christmas, my brother got me a Nikola Jokic bobblehead. I actually had to leave home because we didn't have space in the suitcase back. But I'm a huge Nuggets fan. I'm a huge Jokic fan. And when it comes down to it, Brian, if I had to pick MVP right now, it is not even close. You know when we talk this production wise, Jokic is higher, but that's because centers, it's very interesting. It's a lot like baseball. Something in baseball that is very intuitive that you can think of is your order in the lineup matters. As in, if you are batting fourth or fifth, you are probably batting behind good batters, and as a result, your RBIs should be higher, your on bases should be higher because you might get pitched around. That makes a lot of sense. In the NBA, the one kind of thing in terms of positionful basketball that we remain agreeing with is that where you are allowed to play next to matters a ton. If you play next to the hoop, you should be getting rebounds. That should just happen, and you should be getting shots closer. So Jokic as a center, just centers in general, put up some really productive stats. So Jokic is really good, is third right now in wins produced in the NBA, Like the top three, by the way, are head and shoulders above everybody. So it's Doncic, Halliburton, Jokic are the top three MVP candidates right here. But then the jump between Doncic and Halliburton is basically the same as that group to the next tier. So Doncic is just doing ridiculous, and we're talking Wilt Chamberlain. Luka Doncic just put up a game that we have not seen since the era of Wilt Chamberlain. In fact, we never saw it exactly because it was rebounds, points, assists. He got a triple double, a 60, I think 60-20 triple double, which has never been seen. Now, people rightfully noted there is a good chance that Wilt Chamberlain did that, a 60-point, 20 rebound, 10 block triple double, but he never did an assist one. So this is the first time we've ever seen a point guard put up a game like that in NBA history. Absolutely remarkable. He keeps doing it. And what's really funny looking at MVP lists is the only reason Doncic isn't leading the list is because he's not on a winning team, which I'm giddy and petty about because, one of my easy points was that the Mavericks screwed up by just not re-signing Brunson. And it's not right now. Brunson's a good player, and he was a good player for the Mavericks last season. And my simple point was, it's not even if Brunson was overpaid, which he wasn't. Basically, I think he's fairly priced on the contract he's at. I said, if you have a star and you lose a starting caliber player and do not replace them with a starting caliber player, you have failed. Same argument we've made about your Golden State Warriors. This season counts, and like the bubble year counted as well. It's like if you've got a healthy Steph Curry, or you just have a Steph Curry because they didn't know Curry was going to get injured in the bubble year. If you've got a Steph Curry, it is inexcusable not to have a good roster around that player if you have it. And, the Warriors, as an example, re-signed Klay Thompson knowing that he was going to be out for at least a season, which is just, it's like, that's unforgivable. You're wasting a year of Steph Curry's prime. You cannot do that. And so the same is true of Luka Doncic going, I don't care if you think you're overpaying. It is not overpaying if you get your team to the playoffs with a player that can win you a series. See LeBron James in Cleveland on his first stint. So, it's a bummer, but it also makes me laugh because it proves me right. And, I keep chalking this up where things I've said about the Mavericks being wrong and, still don't get any comeuppance, but still out there.
Oh, there's a lot of rich content to talk about here. Well, first of all, Steph Curry himself was up in that debate a little bit earlier, but now he's hurt, of course. I think he's going to miss at least another week, so he probably is not going to be able to put up enough games. He's going to be probably 10 games behind the other players, so I don't think he's going to be able to stay in contention.
And basically, that is what's remarkable is at least position adjusted. Luka Doncic and Jimmy Butler are kind of at a next tier. Jimmy Butler's just not getting the same.
Jimmy Butler is so underrated every year, but he's another guy who's not played enough minutes. He's down under.
Yeah, he's gonna. I mean, Jimmy Butler's it's kind of a weird comparison. He's kind of like a modern day Shaq, that he's gonna get you 60 games a season and play those great and do really well for you in the playoffs, and that probably hurts his overall MVP chances. Same as Shaq. Shaq only has the one, which is ridiculous. But so basically, Steph Curry, at least per minute, is kind of second tier, not by much to be clear. Doncic and Butler are like tier one. But yeah, so Steph Curry, for what it's worth, is still in the MVP debate, even by our standards. But you're right. I think that's just going to be too much ground to make.
Well, it's going to have to be several other people getting hurt, right? Which, of course, we're rooting against. Worth pointing out, not only is Halliburton up there on good old Boxscore tonight as of January 3rd, he's second in wins at 8.4. Luka is number one, just hit 10 wins for the season, which is pretty impressive. But Sabonis, the player he was traded for, is fourth in wins. Behind Jokic is the other player at 6.8, tied with Jimmy Butler. It's pretty incredible that I will still say that the Kings screwed this trade up big time, giving up on Halliburton, a player whose stats people think are similar to Chris Paul at the same age, which is pretty amazing. But they're still playing really well, for their standards. And Sabonis is being a big part of it.
This is a fun one. So a throwback to another argument we've had recently. And we didn't actually have an argument about Halliburton. We agreed, but it's the same bit of logic. You and I kind of discussed if Victor Wembanyama is worth tanking for.
Oh, right.
And what I kind of said is like, I have a win because even in the ideal scenario, Like it takes so many things going right for it to be, worth it. And the easy point about Halliburton versus Sabonis is they both have contracts through 2024, so they're good for one more year. Halliburton is getting paid 4.2 million this season and 5.8 next season. Sabonis is getting paid 18.5 this season, 19.4 next season. One thing that Sabonis is surprising me a little on is his stamina. Like that was another thing, is that if you look at Sabonis after year 4, where he actually did get All-Star nod, he just has not put up over 60, like 63 games a season. This season it looks like he's going to. And shout out to Paul DeVos, who was like looking at players like Shaq, just noting you have really big players. Their longevity is as much. And actually, Dave Barry, one of the last times we talked to him on this show, I think almost a year ago now, noted that the research on the age curve agreed. Basically said bigs have a sharper age curve than guards, which makes a lot of sense because if you're a really big player that's putting a lot of wear and tear on your body, you just fall apart quicker. So I mean, our simple point was, if you compare, it's we hate the usage curve around here, scale curves, but if you look at the age curve, Tyrese Halliburton is younger, Tyrese Halliburton is cheaper, and Tyrese Halliburton is a more um longevitive. I don't think that's a word, Brian. I'm making up words just like Edward Norton and Glass Onion. But Tyrese Halliburton, right, is should stick around longer. So it's basically going, this is, if you're just comparing the two, getting into the geeky stuff like salary and, future stuff, Halliburton was a better pick. And even for like the Kings, this is another funny thing coming up, is Tyrese Halliburton loved the Kings. And it's really, really hard to get that kind of buy-in from people for franchises. And so as an example, when Sabonis's contract is up, especially with how he's playing, he's going to demand a max. He's going to be more expensive than Halliburton. Halliburton probably would have just, signed on the dotted line immediately. They might end up in contention with, if Sabonis wants to stick around. If he's, even if he's playing great, if the Kings are horrible, he might just say, no, I don't want to play with you. So, whereas I think Halliburton had said he liked the team so much, he might have stuck around. So it's a funny thing where, even with both players playing great, the fun thing when they were traded for each other, if I recall, is they were equal in wins produced when that trade was made last year. Halliburton's pulled a little ahead, but you can still make the case that Sabonis was worth it, I guess, in quotes. I still think it was a bad trade. And I love that even in like the ideal scenario, even with Sabonis putting up like 20 games on the regular, we still say that the Kings made a mistake, which is a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's right. And, I think the logic with the Kings, okay, an aside on the Kings, Dre, we have to mention, I'm going to get the name of it wrong, but have you been seeing the victory ceremony they have this year? Like the light of God or the torch of victory or whatever. They project this blue beam up from the stadium after a win. It's just the best celebration ceremony ever. So check out the Kings doing that. It's corny, but that's the kind of things I like. Um,
All right, well, I'll give that to you. I'm looking that up as we speak.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about Donovan Mitchell, but just a couple of the other players that are here, some of the top win producers so far in the early season. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of Oklahoma City, not a very talented roster, but he has really broken through and become that top player that does everything. He's almost like the new Russell Westbrook there at OKC. He rebounds, he assists, he shoots efficiently, which Westbrook did during his prime, and different type of player, but he's doing it all. It's been good to see the fans of his get rewarded for that, because he has got a lot of fans. Josh Hart on the Portland Trailblazers is a great one. He's been good wherever he's gone. He was good on the Lakers. He was good on the Pelicans. He's been hurt all the time. He is not hurt this year. He's healthy. He's played over 1,100 minutes as of today, and he's playing great. And famously, Josh Hart hates analytics, so we are a fan of his. And it's also worth pointing out another player who is an MVP candidate before he got hurt. Anthony Davis was having a tremendous year this year.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot with Chris Ye about this, where obviously they won the trophy. And I still get upset with everybody, even people I like on Twitter, that are like, the Mickey Mouse trophy, the bubble year. It's like, no, the Lakers
Bullshit.
won that trade. They won the trophy. And it's worth noting the best player in that trade. Okay, there were two players that I would argue are really good in that trade, right? Josh Hart being one of them. They got Josh Hart and, I'm going to mess up the name, but Lonzo Ball, right? I'm gonna accuse up the
Yes,
balls for
Lonzo
forever.
Ball was on the Lakers. Yep, he got traded for Anthony
Lonzo Ball
Davis.
and Josh Hart were great, and you could maybe argue on paper they were worth Anthony Davis. It's worth noting Josh Hart ain't playing for the Pelicans. He's playing for Portland. He
Yep,
left, and then Lonzo Ball got
yep.
injured. So it's like the team that lost Anthony Davis didn't even get to enjoy the rewards for Anthony Davis. It was a very Charles Barkley situation. So I mean, Josh Hart is one. Yeah, I think we love the players. If we're talking MVP, let's throw a few out. So you said Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who we've loved forever. What was interesting is if you looked at his age curve, we thought he was set to break out. We loved him as a junior. He
He
had a
came in
good.
young, right, to the league, so and was
He was
already good.
he was above average as a rookie,
Yeah,
which is fantastic. If you get a starting caliber player as a rookie, you've won. That is one of our normal tenets. Is even if you love the player, even if you think Wembanyama is going to be a future star, I still get to bet on him being average to below average as a rookie, and that's using Bayesian statistics. But he was above average as a rookie, Alexander. He was really, really good as a sophomore. As a junior, we're like, he's set to break out. And the easy tell on a lot of players, you just look for lost minutes. The key one I always bring up, I'm about to drop the name, but a Warriors player who I said was really Harrison Barnes.
right.
So, like, Harrison Barnes was a player that looked really, really good. And then all you have to do is look and go, hey, there's this big drop in minutes and then a big drop in production. Gilgeous-Alexander had that exact same thing happen. In his fourth year, big drop in minutes, his production, he is still a good player, but not great. But it looks like a couple of years later, he bounces back. So we love it. He's another player up there. Steph Curry, we always love. The big two I want to talk about that I think you were saving for last were
Yep,
Lauri Markkanen and Donovan Mitchell. Lauri
yep.
Markkanen, we were talking a ton pre-show. And I one thing that actually shocks me is one of the easy tells I was thinking was that Markkanen, I thought, okay, well, most of his career he's been getting played as a power forward center, and he's been shifted to a small forward. He's been shifted to a small forward power forward. At least that's what our numbers say.
Yeah, his
But
position is
last
3.8 and 4 is a power forward. So this is, I guess, is this Yahoo position still, Dre? Or
so what's interesting, I'll throw this out here, is last year we had him listed as a small forward, but there were other players listed as a small forward. Our algorithm's going to boost him up, so that's what happened there. But Basketball Reference, I went and hopped to them. Their algorithm says that he was a small forward, even more so last year than this year. And even with that in taken into account, his production this year has just absolutely spiked, in large part due to just some fantastic shooting. And what is ridiculous, we were looking at this pre-show, and I'm really curious if he can keep this up. He shoots well from everywhere. In fact, the only place he doesn't shoot well from, which kind of makes sense, we were talking why, is 3 to 10 feet. Oh,
are you
maybe
still
I.
there?
Oh yeah, did we blip for a sec?
Oh, we got you back. Okay, so you're
Okay.
talking 3 to 10 feet.
Yeah, basically, from 3 to 10 feet, Markin is like the only place Markin is below, significantly below average. I think from 10 to I think from 16 feet to 3 feet is like 56%, which is the shit shot range, and league average true shooting is 57.7. I don't know his foul rate at that range, but the only place you don't want him shooting from is 3 to 10 feet. And you and I were talking pre-show about how the reality is 3 to 10 feet is often a bad shooting range for most NBA players. And the logic you and I came up with, it seems to hold, is that if a player is shooting 3 to 10 feet, it probably means they were going to the hoop and got hampered and weren't able to pass the ball and took a shot they didn't want to take.
Yeah, that's right. And I've got his his shot chart up right now on Basketball Reference. And most players in the modern NBA's shot charts look like Markkanen's from this year. What I mean by that is very evenly distributed shots throughout the 3-point range. Some players will have more areas than others, right? Some like the corner, or that's how their offense runs, whatever. Then, of course, a bunch at the rim. Of course, if you're a 7-footer like Markkanen, you're trying to do dunks. And then, like you're saying, the 3 to 10 range shots, they're spread all over the shot chart, right? From different areas. And the thing I was saying before the show is there are players that can shoot well in that 3 to 10 foot range. It's mostly the players that can shoot floaters. That's where they will try to take those from. But a lot of players are not good at shooting floaters and are going to put up a lot of bricks, or like you said, just kind of get stuck and have nothing to do. So yeah, it's a 3 to 10 feet is not an easy area to shoot from.
I mean, the basic point we've made about NBA shooters is even the players that you think are terrible. If you think Ben Wallace, I would argue Ben Wallace could beat most people in a game of horse. It's when you are playing against other players that are intentionally trying to prevent you from shooting that it gets hard. So I think basically 3 to 10 feet is just a contested range, except as you're saying, like Jokic is a good example. He shoots 61% from that range, and he does shoot a lot of floating shots. So that makes a lot of sense. All right, this last player is one, he's been one of our favorites forever, Donovan Mitchell. And here's the funny thing. I applauded this move when it happened. I know you had some back and forth, and I want to stress no one saw this coming. Donovan Mitchell is putting up an MVP caliber performance. I mean, I think he's what, ninth or 10th, three, six. He's ninth in wins per 48 or wins produced, still behind like Steph Curry as an example, but he's ninth right now, which puts him in MVP range. He is the best player on the Cleveland Cavaliers at the moment.
Can I point one thing out though, Dre? Once you get past those top three, it gets very tightly packed. Like the 4th through 10th are much closer in production.
Yeah, then it can kind of be cut. Yeah, like if we were making a vote using the standard 5 count, we would say like Doncic, Halliburton, and then it's a dealer's choice. I could,
Yeah, yeah.
or actually even Jokic. I would say
Yep.
Doncic, Halliburton, Jokic. Take the top three, and then 4 and 5, you can be like Jimmy Butler's underrated. I want to give him a shot. We've always loved Shy. I'm a Golden State guy. Whatever. Lauri Markkanen, but Lauri Markkanen and Donovan Mitchell are the two biggest shocks on the current MVP list. Without all the other players, I would say down to actually Aaron Gordon is a player that's having kind of a breakout year.
He had a
But
really
let's
good game recently.
yeah. So I mean, basically, like if we're talking like the top 20, 25 players, there are only a couple surprises. Markkanen is the huge one. We already talked him. Donovan Mitchell is playing out of his mind. I thought the point I made when he was traded to Cleveland is I basically said Cleveland is in a great spot, right? They've got I should get their roster up in front of me because I'm already spacing a bunch of the good players' names, but players that we know. They've got Jared Allen, who we absolutely love.
Yeah.
Evan Mobley was a great rookie. Kevin Love still apparently got some gas left in the tank, which is going on. Darius Garland actually seems to be turning it around. So good work because he got a an all-star nod, and you're like, wait, really? But anyway, so all these players, right, are doing really well. Or actually, was it Karis LeVert? No, sorry, getting stuff wrong, getting confused. But we were like, this is a really young, really talented team. Donovan Mitchell is an above-average starter, and not only is Donovan Mitchell an above-average starter, he is a player that is both going to convince star players, think like Evan Mobley, to stick around, and possibly even get other good players to come to teams. That's a well-known thing, right? In the NBA, if you have players that are perceived as stars, other players come, and it's only really a detriment when the player that is perceived as a star is a hindrance. Think like Carmelo Anthony.
Well, Mitchell also has the personality, right? That not all stars have. Like his personality is more like Steph Curry than Kevin Durant, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that was what was always the roughest in Utah. Is in Utah, the easy art, and actually, we should talk a little Utah. Like we can do Cleveland, Utah. That's a fun set of combos to finish kind of this stuff up with. But Donovan Mitchell in Utah was really rough because production wise, I was always going Rudy Gobert is the star. Donovan Mitchell is overrated and overpaid. And then off the court, Rudy Gobert, of course, didn't take COVID seriously enough, is promoting people that are saying, stupid right wing politics stuff still going on. And just like, screw this guy. Whereas then Donovan Mitchell is saying cool stuff off the court, doing cool stuff off the court, being in Spider-Man commercials. So it's kind of like personality wise, I went, Donovan Mitchell is the player I would like between the two. And what do I care? It is not up to Donovan Mitchell to tell a billionaire how to spend their money. If a billionaire comes up to Donovan Mitchell and says, I would like to give you a max contract, Donovan Mitchell says yes. And if, that's the thing is like in the NBA, if you don't say yes, someone else will. So it was really hard. That was kind of a conflict that had been festering for a while as the type of analysis we did. And I had kind of started coming to this conclusion before Donovan Mitchell, but Donovan Mitchell really crystallized it going, we're spending all of our time analyzing these players and analyzing their production, and that's fine. And we still do it. But when we come to the judgmental aspect of it, the end result shouldn't be Donovan Mitchell's overrated or Donovan Mitchell's overpaid. Screw him. It should be Donovan Mitchell's overpaid. Does Utah know what they're doing? Right. So, but him playing how he is in Cleveland, including getting this recent pseudo record, right? This is really, really funny because Wilt Chamberlain breaks a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah.
You're never going to touch a lot of what Wilt Chamberlain did in the 60s and 70s. But I think Donovan Mitchell has the second highest points in an NBA game, not regulation. No, it did go to overtime, but he is second behind Kobe. But the funny aspect about that is, Brian, I pointed this out. He had 71 points and 11 assists, Brian. He had 11
Yep.
assists and 8 rebounds. Now this is what's wild. It would have been under most years, including this year, that would have been the game of the year, except for Luka Doncic's 60, 20, 10, or 11, I think, still beats it. But that's also wild too, to have like two historic games that put up 1960s box scores next to each other in a month, Brian. That's just wild.
It is, and it looks like Mitchell has finally done it. I mean, we've been saying he's kind of a fake star the last few years. He's been improving, but he's not as good as everyone says. He's as good as everyone says now. He's really good, and he's carrying the team. And I love all those Cavaliers players you're mentioning, playing the big lineups, because you were talking about Markkanen earlier. The Cavaliers were the ones who moved him to small forward first, right? Because they were so hell bent on these small lineups, and of course he was got traded, but they've still got Dean Wade, the other D Wade, who's like a 6'10" guy playing small forward, and of course Allen and Mobley, the two 7-footers at center and power forward. Those guys are looking good. The Cavs have had injuries has been one thing. You were talking about Darius Garland, who was his All-Star berth legitimate or not. Well, he was hurt a little bit. He's back and he's looking better. Ricky Rubio is back on the Cavaliers as well and has not played at all, but he may be healthy again soon and providing some reinforcements. So, yeah, the Cavaliers, I think, are now number 2 in SRS and probably close in margin of victory behind the Celtics. As they get healthy, they're looking strong. They're looking really strong, and Donovan Mitchell is doing everything on the court for them.
And there are only two real aspects of Cleveland that are kind of funny to me. One thing that's sad is that Robin Lopez is finally done. It looks like he's just not playing great. The only real bad player is Karis LeVert, which I kind of mentioned when they traded for him. It's kind of one of these, like, he wasn't good if they could get rid of him, but they are really, really strong otherwise. But another thing that I love is, as you know, Brian, I have hated for years this weird belief in a defensive sieve, especially defending players that I like Nikola Jokic, in fact, or even Carmelo Anthony. Donovan Mitchell was lambasted for his defense, and when he got signed, I really, really loved when he said, "I'm going to try harder." And I went, "Why would you try harder? You haven't, you weren't paid for your defense. You already have the max contract." Like Donovan Mitchell and Andrew Wiggins with the Timberwolves both like getting the max contract, and after getting the max, going, "Hey, I'm going to try harder at this." It's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Clearly, they don't care. Cleveland Cavaliers are second in defensive rating. And I've always said this, is that when it is so easy to have a visceral dislike of a player that doesn't look great on defense. So Donovan Mitchell got this a lot in Utah, when the reality is this is a team sport. And as long as you are able to work around any deficiencies in some areas, it's not a problem. And in fact, it is really, really hard for one player that has made it to the NBA to be. I just don't buy that there is any player in the history of the NBA that has been a legitimate starter by like wins produced numbers that has been that big of an individual sieve on defense. It's just really, really hard to do. We've seen bad defenders get hidden on good teams. Glenn Baby Davis played for the Celtics, who were like just a defensive juggernaut. We have seen good defensive players, including like Kevin Garnett, who was on that Celtics team, play on teams like the Timberwolves and be terrible. Kevin Garnett, Andre Iguodala, two players known for being great defenders, played on bad defensive squads beforehand. So it's like, one thing I love here is that, as someone who was like first in line on the Donovan Mitchell hater club, and then like I said, I backed off and I was like, yeah, I don't want to be in this club. Like, yeah, I disagree with all the people I'm arguing with, but I don't like the arguments I'm being forced into making by myself, right? Like, if I want to keep arguing Donovan Mitchell's overpaid, he's not an all-star, it's like, yeah, who cares? Doesn't matter. Those people can do what they want to do. He's not that bad. There's absolutely no way he was that bad at defense. And even if you buy the argument he's just trying harder, well, they're second in the NBA. Like, no. So I always love when, as you can tell, using Donovan Mitchell, even using Luka Doncic, I love it when I get to reinforce my own points. To be fair, I'll admit when I'm wrong, like things like Russell Westbrook. So I'm really happy Donovan Mitchell, not only he's playing well, which I predicted, by the way, as a joke. I basically said Donovan Mitchell's playing terribly and I'm bashing him. I've seen this before with Russell Westbrook. I guarantee you he's going to turn into an MVP caliber player just to spite me, so I'm going to leave him alone. That's what I said back in the day when I kind of decided to back off the classic like defending billionaires. That was where it was a real like conflict, Brian. I was like, I'm done defending billionaires. Screw them. They want to spend their money wrong. That's their business. When that happened, I made that as my like reasoning, and it's coming true. So I love it when my predictions come true, Brian.
Oh man. Well, there's a lot of billionaires behaving badly in the NBA. That's for sure.
A
Now,
random tangent. Have you seen a Glass Onion yet?
no, I haven't seen too many
Oh,
new
come
movies.
on, you
Have
got to
not
see it, Brian.
seen
See,
Avatar either. So yeah.
I don't care. I mean, Avatar. By the way, I'll stress this. Like Avatar, one of the things I love about the first movie, as just the stupid things people are going, does anybody care? Nobody sees it. It's like that's just a running theme, and that's untrue. And a bunch of people saw it. Highest grossing movie of all time. Maybe it doesn't have as much like memeable stuff as other people say, but clearly a memorable movie that a bunch of people saw and enjoyed. Avatar 2, I've heard good stuff about, just haven't gotten to see it. But Glass Onion's really, really good. I think you'd enjoy it. Please try and
Nice.
check it out before next show
I
on the
haven't seen
off
the
chance I
first
do.
one yet either, so I've got some work
Oh
to
my
do. I
Brian,
know,
I
I
we
know.
got to call the show and just let you go watch those. They're both you'll enjoy it. I mean, it's like Daniel Craig is amazing. So yeah, go
We're
watch
at
the
57 minutes, so we're getting close to the end.
okay, yeah. So I should we should end it. All right. Which is more than fine. This will be a well-sized show. I've hit actually all the players I wanted to, I think. Or do we want to talk any other MVP players or anything like that, Brian? Beyond that, we can
No,
start
I mean,
winding down.
I do want to look into deeper about Mitchell's turnaround. It seemed, I mean, who knows? Maybe he just worked really hard in the offseason or is playing harder, like you said. But I'm suspicious it's something more like Utah's old coach, who also got fired. His name I'm forgetting, was not a very well thought of offensive coach, and I'm suspicious that part of the reason that led to us hating Donovan Mitchell for the early years of his career, and I don't mean hating literally, you know what I mean,
Hmm.
just in the
Calling him overrated, yeah.
calling him overrated. But the point is, I think the coach may have just been putting him out there to jack up a bunch of shots and telling him it's fine. And now that he's on a different team, with better players on offense, maybe he's doing a little better.
Well, I mean, that's always a funny thing that I just in general makes analytics really hard. And I think a lot of quantitative people just fail when they're trying to make their metrics or make their arguments is it is really difficult to account for the human factor, as in, is your player going to be getting the minutes they should be? Is your player going to be getting the role they should be? And when you really like a player and that does or does not happen, it's really tempting to say, okay, well, let's readjust the coefficients because clearly Donovan Mitchell is better than his numbers say. That's one of the arguments we've always made at Wages of Wins and with the wins produced stat is basically we are just telling you what they did. That's it. It's a descriptive stat. It is a descriptive stat that is usually very predictive, but with it gets almost impossible to know for certain what is going to happen when a player changes teams. And I think a lot of people want a stat that's going to tell them, I know for a fact what's going to happen. And I think some parts is just leaving out the hard work of what a front office needs to be doing, which is deciding what they should do with the players and do it right. And after the Spurs kind of fell post Tim Duncan, I've just made the argument. I don't really have faith in any front office really knowing what they're doing across the board. Coaching's a different ballgame. That might be the case, but it's really hard to judge. And so I could buy some of that. I also want to wait, right? I want to see how long Donovan Mitchell keeps this up because he is shooting lights out. He's doing amazing. In the worst case, if he has a drop off and just turns into a good player, that's still fine. But I do want to see if it's a Russell Westbrook like transformation.
Yeah, it's right. We're at the point in the season where we've had a lot of games and it seems like players might be what they are, but still, can they keep it up all the way into the playoffs? And Mitchell's, unfortunately, him and Gobert's teams, they didn't go as far as they were supposed to go in the playoffs. They did not play up to their seeding most of the time. So, how's he going to be, as a smaller player when he's getting beaten down in Game 6 of the NBA Finals? We'll see what
Well,
happens.
wait, now here's an interesting question. I think what is Michael Jordan the only one to have done it? And I actually want to look this up. I was about to say Nikola Jokic might take three straight MVPs, which would be the first time that's happened in a while. Um, and he's just amazing. I mean, that's the answer there, which is just mean, right? Uh, Jokic, that Jamal Murray Donovan Mitchell feud. That this is tough because we were just talking like all time feuds. That series in the bubble is one of the greatest duels in NBA playoff history.
Remind me, how long did the one game go? It was like 3 or 4 overtimes.
I think they did a 4 overtime game with Portland the year before that they
Oh, okay.
lost,
I'm
which was a
sorry. I'm mixing it
heartbreaker.
up. I'm
But
mixing it up.
they did a ton of overtimes, including I think 2 different overtime games against the Jazz, and took it to game 7, coming back from 3-1. They came back from down 3-1 2 times. Like that was one of the most amazing runs in playoff history in Nugget history, and then was one of the most amazing duels between Murray and Mitchell. I want to say they had a game where they both put up like 50. That was just an amazing series. And of course, Donovan Mitchell stayed healthy and is turning into a star, and Jamal Murray got injured. We didn't talk much about my Nuggets, Brian, because it's just,
Yeah, no Warriors
despite them,
either.
the Nuggets are in first, but I'm depressed
Oh,
because,
no.
well, like, okay, so here's an interesting point. We can kind of wrap up a little on this. The Nuggets the other night had a win against Boston. And what was interesting is Jamal Murray was injured. And if you looked at the Nuggets starting five, it was their 5 most productive players. Christian Braun's kind of been going down. I know you really liked him early season, but he's young. I mean, we'll see what he turns into. But the Nuggets played their 5 best players. I'm forgetting the guard, the one they got from Brooklyn. But KCP, Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., Jokic in that guard, Bruce Brown. There we go.
Oh, yeah, he's
They
good on
played that starting
defense.
5, who are their
Yeah.
5 best players, and they beat a really good team. And then, of course, the next game, Jamal Murray comes back and they lose to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about them. They're in first place, but it's just like they're in first place for the same reason they won that series they shouldn't have won against Utah, which is Jokic is just that damned good. And this is a year they could be running away with a conference. They could be going for a title. And I don't know if I have faith in it. And it's a little bit rough because part of it is Murray. Like Murray and Michael Porter Jr. were players that were worth the risk, that were playing great and got injured kind of unexpectedly. And so it's really kind of frustrating to have to deal with that. But then you look at some of the other moves, like, I still do not believe Jeff Green being on the team. I'm still angry at them trading away, Monty Morris and Torrey Craig. So it's like, it is really annoying to have a team with a transcendent MVP, and to and I'll argue that, see them waste it even when they're doing okay, and me just not believing that that's going to turn into playoff success. Last point on that thing to remember about both Denver and Utah is that at least in normal seasons, their altitude gives them a home court advantage of about 4 or 5 games. So if you look at the Denver Nuggets, they're actually they're like the Minnesota Vikings of the NBA right now, where yes,
Mm.
they're number one in their conference and number one in their division. Their SRS is 1.36, which places them 11th in the NBA.
Okay, that's okay. I've never noticed this trade, but you're totally right. And their wins are 24 and 13, but their Pythagorean wins, the wins we expect them to have based on their margin of victory, is only 21 and 16.
Yeah, really, the teams that are contenders, at least with how they're currently playing, are the Celtics, the Cavaliers, the Grizzlies, and the Pelicans. And I'll give the 2 cents of the Grizzlies. I just will not believe in them as long as they have Dylan Brooks and Jaren Jackson being starters, because they're going to get more minutes in the playoffs, and that's going to cost them. The Pelicans, I think Zion just went down. I'm worried about injury. So, I mean, I think Celtics versus Cavaliers is going to be the deciding title team this year if things go. Although, actually, sorry, apologies. Brooklyn Nets, they didn't make our radar, but a key thing, Ben Simmons and Kevin Durant appear to be back. And so it's frustrating too, Ryan, but Kyrie Irving. So essentially they had 3 really good players. Kyrie Irving is the distant third of those 3, but still in there. They looked injured and beat up to start the season, and they all look back, and they are making a run because they are third in Pythagorean wins, fourth in the NBA, third in their conference. But that's with a monumental run they're going on now. So actually, I think at the moment the winner, the favorite to win the NBA title this season is out of the East, and it's Boston, Cleveland, or the Nets.
Yeah, I've been watching the Nets quite a bit, and the 76ers haven't been bad either, or the Knicks for that matter. But, I, you know, Ben Simmons being healthy again is something. I almost doubted for a moment. There was such a big crush in the media. Oh, he's defeated mentally. It was because of that one layup in the playoff that he never took. He's done. No, he just had a back injury, and his back is healthy now, and he looks like the old Ben Simmons. And yeah, I might pick the Nets as my favorite, depending on Rob Williams' health. That's going to be a big question for the Celtics. Cavaliers, I love as well. We just talked about them, but when you got Ben Simmons and Kevin Durant, that is so much size. Like, that is tough.
My main take on the 76ers, I'm already seeing this. I just don't think Embiid is going to make it to the playoff. He has yet to do this. I don't think Embiid's going to make it to the playoffs healthy.
Yeah, it's
It just it's happened. He has yet to have a season of healthy regular season and healthy playoff play, even by like Shaq standards, which is a problem. He has had one healthy playoffs, which they almost made the finals, and then had that bullshit triple bounce from Kawhi.
oh
And he
god.
had one healthy regular season, which was last one healthy regular season, which I believe was last season. I don't buy that he crosses 2,000, like some combination of like 2,000 regular season minutes and let me see if we can do some math, 300 playoff minutes. I just don't buy him crossing those two thresholds in the near future. Which with apologies. So I mean, it's possible they're in the thick of it right now. But if we're talking injury concerns about the playoff watch, and those would be the teams I'd watch.
And I
Like,
think you're right about the Pelicans as well. They've been looking really good, but just way too many injuries. Zion is not the only player that's really broken out for them this year. Larry Nance Jr., who's been one of our favorites for a long time, has finally gotten some minutes there and played well, but he's hurt also. So it's a really interesting team. Brandon Ingram has looked better. I've
yeah,
been
and
slower,
he's actually out injured now.
and he's hurt as well.
Luckily, it's with the
Yeah,
toe,
yeah.
and I don't know if it matters. This is just according to Basketball Reference. EJ Little, I want to say that, and he's out for the season, but I don't think he mattered in the grand scheme.
Yeah, so that's the that is the common theme amongst all these teams we're looking at as we start to get to this point in the season is who is starting to get healthy, that and who is getting more more hurt. That's a really big deal.
And by the way, I figured I'd at least touch on this because we're trying to cram a lot into the show so we can end on this point.
Sure.
Basically, the Utah Jazz, it's basically a combination of three things. We already talked Lauri Markkanen just playing out of his mind, which I'm sorry. Like there are takes that you can have, including even some of my flippant ones, like, oh, Donovan Mitchell's going to break out, which fine, I'll give it to you. Nah, I didn't see this much though. I'll say that. I thought it was going to be a good, 150. I thought he was going to be an 8-win, 150 wins producing player on a title team. I didn't see him being the MVP of the second best defensive team in the NBA. No one saw Lauri Markkanen coming. I'm sorry, I just don't believe you.
He
If
looks like
anybody's
a
like,
completely different player on offense, especially. He
yeah,
looks like
it's
Larry Bird. Like he's got all the moves. He can go to the basket and do spin moves and fadeaways. Like he looks ridiculous.
so yeah, Lauri Markkanen breaking out. Vanderbilt, who we really liked playing, getting the minutes he's supposed to, and then Walker Kessler, a rookie. That's the other thing
Yes.
we always stress is that as you liked Walker Kessler as a rookie, you've got good taste in rookies, Brian. I think you've picked like the wins produced MVP like 3 or 4 seasons randomly just to like start the
Oh
season.
no,
I
it's
think
so
you like
easy. All the draft analysts just find like the big centers that were good at defense in college, and they're almost always good in the NBA.
yeah.
Like Kessler
So
doesn't even shoot threes. He's just a straight up old school defensive center.
and you really liked him, and he's playing amazing, which is always just an added bonus. I mean, I've got questions. The Minnesota Timberwolves would be fascinating to analyze at some point. I
Yeah.
mean, Rudy Gobert is playing good for them, but not great. Like he's not playing Vanderbilt levels. And there's just some other wonkiness. So, at some point I'll have to analyze that team. But I mean, the real reason why that trade is like lopsided is really that the prospects that Utah got back are being much better than like are just being amazing. Which that was even one of the things I saw as a problem. I was like, oh, they got Markin, and this is going to hurt them. And then I was like, oh wait, never mind. Markkinen's good. And I'm like, oh, they got Walker Kessler. He's a rookie. It's going
Vanderbilt
to take him.
Vanderbilt's the problem for the Wolves. They needed to keep him in that trade.
I don't know if I mean this is the same questions like Josh Hart for Anthony Davis. I think that the trade centered around him. And then the dagger to my heart, right, Brian, is that the Denver Nuggets drafted both Vanderbilt and Rudy Gobert.
Oh, of course. Oh, I do
So
remember the
there,
Nuggets drafted Gobert.
the Nuggets. Oh, and then of course But we, It's nice to be back in the groove, and then just realize how much stuff we've missed talking about. But I also say like Bol is playing out of his mind this season, and it's like,
Oh
oh
yeah.
yeah, we drafted him too. So it's like the Nuggets are really really good at drafting really talented power forward centers and then letting them out the door, and then other teams go, wow, this player's really good. So
This is a great year for us, even if it's not for the Nuggets and the Warriors. It's a great year for the players that we like,
yeah, that's
such
true.
as Bol. It seems like they're all starting to get there. It- you know, the Timberwolves are tough. I've been following them too because they're another big team, right? I always love watching the big teams. And Brian Windhorst did a segment on them recently from ESPN, and I think it's that same old boring story we were just talking about. Everyone's hurt. Towns has not played with Gobert almost at all yet. He's just been
Really?
hurt. Yeah, Towns has been hurt, and several other important players have been as well.
And Anthony Edwards, who, Anthony Edwards is getting bitten by the Andrew Wiggins bug. He's starting to like rebound to what he was last year. But we were like, oh, if he can just be above average and have a normal growth curve and just be a decent player, which is what he was on track to do last season. And then he started the season god awful. Looks like he's back on track, which is good. But I mean, that's the funny combo of this team is that, Anthony Edwards and then now, yeah, Rudy Gobert just not really living up to what you're expecting, or not Rudy Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns. Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards kind of not being what we'd expect in this year. And I mean, you can at least give injury to Towns. I'm not quite sure on Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, I mean he's still not bad for his age. It's just that last year he took a big step forward, and we want to see another big step. He's not good enough, to be their lead guard at this point because D'Angelo Russell is kind of average, but whatever. He's not consistent. He's not going to give you enough on defense, unfortunately. And
Didn't look into this one, and this is just a shock. Is Jalen Noel or Noel or however you say it, 758 minutes, god awful, which is kind of out of nowhere because last season with the Timberwolves in 975 minutes, he was a really good player. So I kind of just
hmm,
looked at the Timberwolves page and hadn't really been paying attention. But yeah, they have a kryptonite player, which is odd because you have a shooting guard that had a really good third year. And you're like, okay, well, if you just keep that up next year, you're great. And it's just terrible this season. That's really weird. Forgot how to shoot.
yeah, his shooting looks bad.
All right.
Shoot.
Well, Brian, we'll get back to like the Warriors and other teams. Good to yak in the groove. I'm hoping to do 2 weeks, barring an Arctic storm or something. Anything else you want to end on before the end of the show? I got a couple cool shout out stuff.
Oh no, that's it. Happy New Year. It's just great to be back, and yeah, I'm ready for your shout outs.
All right. Well, the good news is Dave Barry. So good news, bad news. If you want to find the old Wages of Wins blog, you can go to the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, and you can find stuff. And if you want to dig through that, you can just type in wagesofwins.com. You'll see you in the comment section as an example before you started hosting the Box Score Geek show.
Yep.
That blog went to about 2016. Unfortunately, it was on GoDaddy. The server for that got deprecated for WordPress hosting, and basically the server got wiped. So that Wages of Wins blog is gone with the exclusion of the good news is we never like turned off spiders. So it is on the Wayback Machine. So you're still able to find all of the stuff that basically was primarily when I was a lead writer, when Devin Dignam was there, et cetera. During that era of the Wages of Wins, you have to go to the Wayback Machine, but that era is gone, at least at the wagesofwins.com. We may or may not do something with that website. But the good news about that is that I helped Dave log back into that, and I got his old blog. So 2011, when he just wrote, and I think he wrote 1,500 plus pieces, I got him on Substack. So he imported his old blog there. So you can find all of Dave's old writing at wagesofwins.substack.com, and Dave might start writing again. I'm actually going to interview him, I hope, on Thursday. I'm going to put that at 70%, Brian. It's one of those where we've agreed it, it's marked on the calendar. But I've told you before that Dave Barry is so busy that it's always fantastic. Where he's like, we should really do like at one point he's like, we should do a podcast on the NFL draft, and I was like, sure, Dave, let's do that. In the back of my head, I was like, that's not happening. I knew ahead of time. In theory, I'm interviewing him on Thursday. We're going to talk some about writing. We're going to talk about the WNBA, and he might get back into writing on Substack. So that's the first shout out, which is huge.
Oh no, that's
Anyway,
great, and I didn't even know that that old pre 2011 blog existed. So I'm gonna check this out.
yeah. And so, yeah, wagesofwins.substack.com. A lot of Dave's old writing, a lot of really cool, interesting stuff. It's fun to see what stuff has changed and what stuff hasn't. Other big shout out I'll give to myself, actually. Myself and Jeff May have recorded a series of podcasts. We did one on the He-Man and She-Ra Christmas special. We did one on the Muppet Christmas special. And in the upcoming month, we're going to be doing one on Ewoks, The Battle for Endor. That's on a podcast called Nerd, which is hosted over at Jeff Has Cool Friends. really, really been digging that, really enjoying kind of running down that rabbit hole. I definitely got on a He-Man kick this holiday season. I pulled out my old Castle Grayskull and stuff when I was back home. So that's been a lot of fun. If you check out patreon.com/Jeff May or just look for nerd exclamation point. Yeah, that's even more of me talking, which is of course what you want. So if you're sick of me talking basketball, you can listen to me talk about antiquated pop culture.
Hey, Muppets Christmas is way better than Die Hard, I think.
Oh yeah, Muppet Christmas. I mean, that's not hard. It was the A Muppet Family Christmas 1987 is an amazing Christmas special. We talk about it. So yeah, and Die Hard's a Christmas movie, but whatever. So is Home
Yeah.
Alone. Yeah, it's fine.
Damn
All
right.
right, Brian. Any shout outs for you, or should I lead us out?
No, I think we're good. It's just great to be back.
Yep. We'll see you all, hopefully, barring anything else. We'll see you all in 2 weeks. You can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. I'm thinking long term, Brian, I might actually just move the blogging of Box Score Geeks to Substack. I might make a Box Score Geek Substack or do it on Nerd Numbers. We'll see. But don't worry, we'll try and do some tool development sometime in the next 5 years. I'll say 5 years, Brian. We'll do that. So boxscoregeeks.com for the numbers, nerdnumbers.substack.com for the writing. You can find Brian Foster on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. You can find myself on Twitter as Nerd Numbers, as long as it's still around. Wherever it ends up, I'm sure we'll keep similar usernames. Brian. Of course, you can find the Boxscore Geek Show anywhere anywhere podcasts are found. There we go. You can find the Box Score Geek Show anywhere podcasts are found. The Box Score Geek Show, twitch.tv/nerd numbers. We go live every 2 weeks, usually on Tuesday around 9:30 p.m. Eastern or 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then, of course, the recaps are on channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. Man, Brian, can you tell him how to practice next time? I promise it will be better. Have a good week, everybody. Talk to you then.